Today is today is Mother's Day, right? Today's Mother's Day, and per Mother's Day, I always think about my own late mother. Okay, my own late mother, because if she wasn't my mother, I wouldn't be the person I am today on many different levels, positive and negative and whatnot. But she passed away many years ago, and to me, like she was really the epitome of a mother and shit in all things, positive and negative, especially in the my ethnic community, the foundational Black American community and shit. She did all the things mothers do. She took care of me when I'm sick. They excoriated me for not doing my homework sometimes with an ironing cord, and yelled at me and shit a lot of times, and poo-pooed me and shit. Sometimes I'd laugh and say that if I wasn't black, considering who my mother was, I'd be like Jewish or something, because she would kvetch and trip out on me and shit. You know, in her later years, supposedly she had started to show signs of dementia. Now I dispute that now, knowing what I know. You know, I won't go any further on that, but I do miss my mother. I miss her. I miss her voice. I miss her grace. You know, I was in the military, and in my basic training, during like the last days of right before I graduated, there's this thing the drill sergeants did where they made you disassemble your weapon on top of your bath towel. It was like a long, the big towel that you used to dry yourself off with. They made you disassemble your weapon and into its component parts and clean each part. And if you didn't do it properly, they had like an oil can there, and they would spray your entire weapon down with oil. You had to clean all that out. And anybody that's ever been in the military knows how hard that is to do, especially to the very small parts of it of a weapon, M16 A2 with a rib stock. So I had gone through two cycles of this, and I was sitting in my room. I was so fucking angry, and I felt despair, you know. And I remember feeling this, this kind of weird feeling, you know. And I looked over my shoulder. My mother was standing there in the barracks, looking at me with my younger sister and my cousin, my younger cousin. They had taken a road trip to see me graduate. And once I saw them, I felt good. I felt fulfilled and shit. And I asked how she knew what barracks I was in. Obviously she could have asked somebody what building I was in, but she said I miss her voice. I miss her grace. She I'm her heir apparent, morally speaking and shit. I've always been her heir apparent. I have two female siblings. I'll leave it at that. But I am the inheritor of the family goodwill and the family, whatever you want to call it and shit. My father was the only person that ever gave me some kind of ethics, and he would call me up on the phone, despite what, people in the family would say and shit. They didn't know anything about us. My father would call me up and talk to me and give me my marching orders as far as what to do and what not to do ethically. He was big on ethics for me and no one else. And my mother would do the same goddamn thing. And sometimes I had to see the ugly parts of them and shit. I was an NPC in my own life. It's kind of like the little kid in that movie Soul Food and shit. I got to see a lot of, fucked up behaviors and shit from the parents and my peers and shit. And I think about it sometimes on days like this. And I think about my mother and shit. And she did a lot of shit to build me into the man I am today, while simultaneously doing things that, would destroy a lesser person and shit, okay? And I miss her, you know? I miss her. The only person that, is alive today that I will tell Happy Mother's Day is my former wife, okay? Because we had a kid. And because she parents the kid, we have a good relationship parenting our kid. I have two kids, all right? All right, and the kid that I have, whatever, I parent actively. And she would, she was a good enough wife to me, you know, good enough, as far as my experience and the fact that I'm on here making these fucking videos and shit, you know. So I tell her Happy Mother's Day with my whole heart, all right. And I can't really say, you know, today is May 10th, 2026, all right. And the reason I'm making a video today is because I want to tell whoever's within the sound of my voice. I don't expect to get a lot of views on this video. No one seems to watch that, or they shadow ban these. Certain videos get shadow banned, right? I think whoever's behind the screen over there, moderating my fucking videos, certain things they just don't want to get out, to be quite honest. Uh, they don't want you to have like no real useful information. They seem to let me get by when I shred, black female misandry and shit, which is my my stomping, my issue. Okay, all right, it's my pet project and shit, defunding that shit and destroying that shit. But I'm making a video today that I want to tell you it's okay. You know, it's okay to pay respects to your mom and shit on a special day, or her birthday today, whatever. If she was a good mother. Okay, if she wasn't, it's okay to keep it pushing and shit. Because ultimately they ain't gonna care anyway and shit. I used to make it a point on my mother's birthday, in December, to call her up at midnight, you know, when her birthday, right at the crack of midnight, I would call her and tell her happy birthday. Because I always wanted to be the first of her children to tell her that and shit. Right? And I told her happy Mother's Day, you know. And today's Mother's Day. She's not here, but I want to tell her in heaven, happy Mother's Day, Mom. I love you. I miss you. Right? And sometimes I'm angry with my mother and shit because I'm the inheritor. I'm a guy, right? Obviously. And I inherited her moral, legacy and shit. All right. I inherited the entire of my, both of my parents were the eldest siblings of their family and, posthumously shown the least of respect. And when it grates on me that, I was the middle child and, it's not middle child syndrome and shit, but I grew up in a misandrous gulag and shit. All right. I grew up in a misandrous gulag and shit. Sometimes, when women aren't, holding all of their children accountable for their behavior and shit, you get a certain situations that arise. And because I'm the moral inheritor and shit, I'm left with the an unenviable task of putting things right, And I don't know what I could do in 2026, here in May of 2026. I don't know what I could do to fix that shit, other than doing something that the other people, that share my lineage wouldn't like. Right? It sucks. But, I must do something for my parents' memory and their legacy and shit because I'm the sole inheritor. When I go, when I pass away or whatever, I take everything with me. The entire legacy of my mother and father, specifically my mom, very much so my dad, and everything he thought about, they go with me and shit. What's left behind is an abomination. All right? Now, a lot of you are in the same position I'm in and shit, whether you want to be or not. And it's okay. Okay? It's okay. If you don't want to pay respects to your mother and shit, if she was less than stellar, it's okay. Because the term mother is just thrown around recklessly today, which is my point and shit, okay? No, having children does not automatically make you a mother and shit. It makes you a breeder. Alright? I know it's shitty. I need to say that. Some women are going to get upset because it's their body, their choice and shit. And your decisions take everything with it like a vacuum and shit. And then your partner, whoever you had that kid with, has no say in the matter and shit. But he has to take full responsibility for your shitty decisions and what happens to the family. It's one of the reasons that when I close my videos, I always say that last point and shit. Do not make fallen women the stewards of your household or the mothers of your children and shit, because that is very important. And today is Mother's Day. And I wanted to tell my late mother happy Mother's Day because I already told my ex-wife happy Mother's Day because she is a mother to my son. All right? And we co-parent our child. All right? And I said I had 2 kids. Okay? Now I'm gonna leave that other one. I'll speak on that on Father's Day. Right? Not today. Today is for my late mother and shit. I come from a very spiritual family. Okay? very spiritual family, and I've inherited certain things from my mother that are intangible. I hate to say it, but a year before my mother passed away, I knew she would pass away. A year to the day from when we were in a certain kind of contact and shit. She was kind of saying like she was going to be going, and I was inconsolable. Right, I was inconsolable in Los Angeles while she was in Chicago, Illinois. I was inconsolable for for the entire week. Right, it was like it was a funeral and she was still alive. And a year to the day that I got that message, she was not here. And I went home and I had a muted response and shit. And I looked at the other supposed siblings of the family and other people, and I watched them shit all over her name and make a mockery of her funeral. And I was distraught. But I didn't really say anything to them and shit, or my eldest child and shit was being duplicitous, right? And I knew it, being duplicitous. She was already gone, and I saw her in her coffin, and she didn't even look like herself. And I always think about that. I think about everything that I learned and everything that I experienced growing up, and all the things my mother did, as charitable and otherwise. She was a true earth angel and whatnot. She helped a lot of people in her life and shit. And I read her. I read her obituary sometimes. From when I feel that I miss her, I read her obituary, and you know, they talk about her legacy and everything, but they really leave out all the good works that she did. My mom was in the medical profession, and sometimes people would come over to our house for free medical advice or tell my mother something. She didn't have to help them, but sometimes she would use her nursing experience to help them out or give them some kind of medical advice and go about her business and shit. And she sometimes had two jobs, took a job at a nursing home and eventually quit because she couldn't take the co-workers and cruelty towards the patients and just the inhumane living conditions of elderly people and shit. And today we know that we see a lot of foundational black women who are in the same profession speaking disparagingly on social media about how black men die alone, and laughing and talking, just being witches, right? My mother wasn't that kind of person and shit. And she wasn't perfect, but she didn't have to be. She was human, right? And I see a lack of humanity today in our community, the supposed community and shit. Right? I see a lack of humanity. It makes me miss her all the more and shit, even though I have issues. Right? Today is Mother's Day. I want to say to my mother that I miss you. I miss you. You went too soon. You and my father, my dad, my biological father, as far as I know. I miss you. Okay? All right? But sometimes just the fact that I miss you and what is the reality of today of 2026, what I know to be self-evident and true by default, sometimes makes me angry too. Whatnot, because I feel like I was heavily parented and she didn't have the same amount of parentage for the other people that were there, and they have destroyed everything she was, right, leaving me as the sole inheritor of her legacy, a human legacy, a moral legacy. All right. When she was at her funeral, which was a mockery, I did speak there and whatnot, but I didn't speak in a manner that I felt. I don't feel like it's a betrayal because, as I said, a year before she passed away, I knew that she would be passing away. I just didn't know how, and I still have not gotten the full story. Have not gotten the full story of her passing. Okay, the actual, reason that she passed away. It's all very shady and whatnot. I'm not here pointing any fingers and shit. I just say that it's shady. And I'll push back on that and shit. But at the time, I had a small child, and I was working exorbitant hours and commuting even more exorbitant hours and shit. I was just simply exhausted and whatnot. All right, more exhausted than I am today. You know, well, it's Mother's Day. Okay, you had the right to, you know, we had the right to honor your mother or not. Okay, just because someone had a kid doesn't make them a mother. Okay, and I'm just tired of hearing this shit. I'm tired of this. You know, I one of the reasons I'm making this clip, I have a clip of a woman talking about giving birth and excluding the father of a child. And that she wanted to be experienced for all the women in the family, excluding the guy and shit. And she had this static look, like she was waiting for somebody to push back, but it's in a controlled space, so no one pushed back and shit. And I thought that if I was there, I would push back. I've always pushed back, right? My black sheep status, you know. So, because I'm the guy, and I do the pushback and shit. I know there's nothing left. I'm the last one, okay? And I'm glad for the person that I am today. Okay? Despite all my experiences and everything that I've gone through in the last 6 years, you know, I'm glad. And I love you, Mom. And I miss you. All right? Happy Mother's Day. All right? Happy Mother's Day.